No, I think this team rallied around its overall cause. I don't think this performance today had anything to do with rallying around Nick Sirianni talking about flowers and fertilizers and stuff like that. I think this was a team that is tired of taking a verbal lashing. You have a lot of prideful guys in that locker room, a lot of guys who have played winning football before. You look at the Kelseys, the Fletcher Coxes, guys like that, the Avante Maddoxes, the Lane Johnsons, a lot of these guys, um, and they were tired of it. We talked in recent weeks about Jason Kelsey and his body language that we saw as he walked back to the huddles at times about how frustrated he was. Fletcher Cox came out verbally talking about how frustrated he was. Other players talking about their frustrations to a certain degree. Um, it was just their time. It's the perfect storm. And if
Welcome back, live post-game show. Mark Farzetta, Derek Gunn, Devin Caney, 6abc.com, as well as JAKIB Media YouTube channel. On the heels of a 44-6 Eagles blowout victory of the Detroit Lions. And let's not forget, this show is brought to you by Stateside Vodka, fueled by Stateside Vodka. Use promo code JAKIB, you see it right there in the scroll, for 15% off of a 1-liter bottle. Go to statesidevodka.com. So one of the things I looked at earlier in the season, well, really even before the season started, Nick Sirianni gets hired. We all watched the press conference. We know what that was. And Dan Campbell gets hired to be the Detroit Lions head coach. And does anyone remember what Dan Campbell was saying in that press conference? Do you remember he talked about biting something?
No.
Talking about biting people's kneecaps off. That was that press conference, that intense press conference. And everyone, Dan Campbell's over there talking about biting kneecaps, and Nick Sirianni's over here sweating bullets because he's so nervous being in front of the cameras. Well, the Eagles now have at least 3 wins on the season. And Dan Campbell, who has talked about a heck of a lot of other things in his press conferences, also challenging his starting quarterback in Jared Goff, he doesn't look so good. And this was a game, man, if we're talking about Nick Sirianni potentially being on the hot seat after 1 year, do you think Dan Campbell even sees a second year out there in Detroit?
I don't know, but this goes back to a lot of things that people had been saying, and I'm sure we'll hear throughout the week of it's just the Lions, it's just the Lions.
Yeah.
A lot of what I was hearing and seeing before this game was, Campbell's a much better coach than Sirianni. He's so intense. He calls out his quarterback in press conferences. Yeah. So, I know it's our fan base, it's easy to change your opinion, but I think just keeping that in mind throughout the week as we see the takes on this game will be interesting.
Certainly. And the reason I bring it up is because we talk about bulletin board material, as I was saying before the break. Mm-hmm. And we talk about whether or not that really resonates in the locker room. I certainly think it does, because I look at bulletin board material as a reason for a team to focus. And what do we often say goes into a loss? A lack of focus. They weren't focused enough. They weren't concentrating enough on this game. They were distracted. Well, bulletin board material like Nick Sirianni wearing a beat Dallas shirt or whatever, that helps a Dallas locker room focus. Do you think Nick Sirianni played this in a way where I think he was genuine with his locker room flower speech, but then once it got crazy out of hand by media, myself included, I'm not taking myself away from this, and also fans on social media coming out saying, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's talking about flowers in front of the locker room full of football players. Do you think that this team rallied behind Nick Sirianni at all? Or is this just a classic case of, no, the Lions are just terrible. Nick Sirianni could have talked about biting kneecaps again this week if he wanted to, and they still would have come out with the same offensive output today. Do you think it had anything to do with how well the Eagles played?
No, I think this team rallied around its overall cause. I don't think this performance today had anything to do with rallying around Nick Sirianni talking about flowers and fertilizers and stuff like that. I think this was a team that is tired of taking a verbal lashing. You have a lot of prideful guys in that locker room, a lot of guys who have played winning football before. You look at the Kelseys, the Fletcher Coxes, guys like that, the Avante Maddoxes, the Lane Johnsons, a lot of these guys. And they were tired of it. We talked in recent weeks about Jason Kelsey and his body language that we saw as he walked back to the huddles at times about how frustrated he was. Fletcher Cox came out verbally talking about how frustrated he was. Other players talking about their frustrations to a certain degree. It was just their time. It's the perfect storm. And the thing I love about this game is that because you only get to play it once a week, you just never know what to expect week to week. Prime example, final just in, the Jets upsetting Cincinnati. I mean, when you think about who Cincinnati beat in a span of 8 days prior to this game, and Cincinnati going into this game was the number 1 seed in the AFC. If the playoffs were to start today, and some guy named Mike White, quarterback in the Jets, throws for over 400 yards on Cincinnati's defense, which is a pretty good defense, an opportunistic, pretty good defense. And they put up 34 points against the Cincinnati Bengals. So we just never know what's going to happen week to week. And that's what I love so much about the game. We sit throughout a week and we analyze these games and matchups and strategies and talk about what should happen and what we hope will happen. But you never know what's going to happen until the game is played out. Now, I was among the many going into this game saying, and I said it many, many times on different platforms throughout the week, I fully expect Detroit to get their first win of the season against the Eagles today. Because the Eagles don't do this, the Eagles don't do that, the Eagles don't do the other. The Eagles did everything today I didn't expect them to do. Running the football with authority and not stopping from start to finish running the football. The defense, just clamping down on Jared Goff and embarrassing the Detroit Lions' inept offense. And then putting up over 40 points against Detroit, a Detroit team that had lost 2 games by field goals and basically took the Rams down to the wire last week and were going in for the actual go-ahead score until Jared Goff threw their pick at the goal line to Jalen Ramsey, which completely turned the complexion of the game. So, always expect the unexpected in this game. And, and I'm looking at other scores around the league right now, Titans and Colts are in overtime, and we thought the Colts had that game, and all of a sudden Tennessee rallies back. So that's the beauty of this game. Some things you can predict about this game, some tendencies you can expect to see week in and week out with certain teams that have definitive identities. But with a team like the Eagles, we don't know what to expect week in and week out. And when they come out on top, which has been a rarity this season, that's what makes it even more special, is when we can sit here talk about the amazement and the other surprising nature in which they were able to accomplish what they did in this game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why, though, I mentioned at the start of the show, I'm confused. I'm so happy at the outcome of this game and how we played today, but it doesn't make any sense. Our starting running back goes down,
right.
And then all of a sudden we're running the ball successfully, and just so many little things like that are very confusing. And were we this talented all along? Again, what changed aside from the obvious here? But going back to, low points and morale, and we talked about Jason Kelce last game, and Fletcher Cox spoke out, and it was looking, and it could still be, I don't want to say it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows from here on out, but to me, it was looking very close to rock bottom. And there was a tweet that our friend Trey Thomas, who's been on the show, put out after that fertilizer speech, when all of Eagles Twitter and everyone was kind of making jokes about it. And he's looking pretty pensive, and he says, sitting here thinking was I the soil, the root, the water, or the fertilizer? Hilarious tweet. That I died laughing, but I was also like, this is a low point. A former player who supports this team through thick and thin, Trey Thomas, is making a joke. That's low. And I'm not saying it's hilarious. I'm not saying he did something wrong by doing that. But after that, I was like, we're not going to win another game this season. It's done. Fire everyone, burn it down.
See, Devin used the word happy. She's happy the Eagles won.
Yeah.
My operative word is relieved. I'm not going to say I'm happy right now. I'm relieved that they finally got this proverbial, monkey off their backs, if for nothing more, a week. Now you have to build upon this. And because of the inconsistency of what we've had to endure this season, I don't know what to expect from this team moving forward. Right. I don't know what Nick Sirianni's next speech is going to be. I don't know how they're going to come out and try to attack the LA Chargers, or if they're going to play right into the Chargers' hands, So and I can't emphasize this enough. It's a relief to be able to sit here and laugh and feel good about what they did in this particular game, if only for this particular moment in time.
All right, you did it. Now I gotta say it. All right, there was one thing that really upset me. One thing that really are the early goings, the very early goings.
Why?
The Eagles have the ball on their own 4-yard line.
Yes.
And Nick Sirianni calls a shotgun to have Jalen Hurts stay in the end zone. Who does that? Who puts his own quarterback in the end zone to start a play? Just got him under center, hand the ball to Boston Scott right up the middle. And then after that, they scored 41 points. So I'm not that upset. But just in that first play, I was thinking to myself, what are you doing? This has nothing to do with fertilizer. You're now a weed. Oh, come on, man. That was really it. That's it. Now I just got that out. So now I'm done and I'm back to you.
I was going to say we should have a segment of negativity maybe or concerns. Like I can piggyback. I remember what you're talking about and I forgot because then we did score 40 plus points after that. But I remember even one of the play-by-play was like, oh, that's an interesting choice. It's bad when they comment on that. Devontae Smith. I don't want to say, bad job. I'm again, just a little bit confused why his first reception wasn't until the third quarter. I don't know if that was on him, if that was on Jalen Hurts play calling or what.
Well, he had that drop on that same series.
He had a drop. Yeah, and that was on him, I thought. I didn't think
100%.
That was.
So I don't know. I like he's Devontae Smith and I just want to see more from him. I was a little bit confused by his performance today.
I think it was based on Detroit decided to double up on him and prefer to go one-on-one with the other Eagles weapons. But as we saw, the Eagles pass catchers didn't have to do much catching because they spent most of the day blocking, helping the offensive line block and opening up holes for running backs who were running through gaping holes at times. And, you look at the way Boston Scott and Jordan Howard run the ball, they don't go down on initial contact. The legs are constantly churning, and they're picking up 2 and 3 additional yards, in some cases 4 or 5 additional yards. And that's how you take the steam out of a defense. When your running game is going like that, and the running backs are not going down on initial contact, that wears a defense down mentally as well as physically. And you could tell Detroit's defense, man, even when they had that halftime break and came out and the Eagles kept running the football, they were done. They were basically done because no matter what they tried to do, how they tried to stack the box, the Eagles kept picking up positive yards. Very few plays they had today were negative plays. And that's demoralizing to a defense. They've got to sit in that locker room and stand at the podiums and stuff like that and answer the questions of how do you let any team run for 244 yards in your backyard and run the ball 46 times. They've got to think about that. It's bad enough they're 0 for the season, but now they've got to think about, and the question is going to be asked the way we've asked it throughout the weeks here. Have the Lions quit on the coaching staff? Have they quit on each other? So now they've got to stand there and defend themselves in terms of whether or not they're acting like and performing like professional athletes, which is what we question the Eagles on for weeks now. So, that's a demoralizing scenario to be in. It's good. And it's a good thing the Eagles are on the giving end instead of the receiving end again.
Should we send John McMullen to the Detroit locker room instead of the Eagles locker room just to see what they're saying over there, see if they have quit? We should. John, dip your toes in the other locker. Just see what's going on over there.
Everyone sprints to both locker rooms.
But in all seriousness, you said happy. You were happy, Gunner. What? What did you say? Pleasantly surprised?
No, Devin said happy. I said there's nothing wrong with being happy. I said I'm not going to use the word happy.
Relieved.
I'm using the word relieved.
Relieved. Yeah. I'm pleasantly surprised.
Right.
Because I picked the Eagles to win this game. My final score was 24-23. I thought the Eagles would put up a bunch of points in the first half and then make us all sweat out the second half.
Right.
But they didn't do that. They controlled from start to finish. They scored 44 points, 44-6, getting that win. That's great. But again, I'm looking at this really no different than I am as I look at next week's game against the Chargers. Like, I didn't expect the Eagles to play as well as they did. I expected them to play good, but not this well. And they played this well. But for me, it doesn't change a whole lot. I didn't think that they were the worst team in the NFL. I did worry about Nick Sirianni's game plan going into this. I did worrying about consistently throwing the football against this Detroit Lions team and not just trying to out-muscle them with your offensive line, even if you were going to be down Jack Driscoll earlier, who was going to be, obviously your starter. But when you look at this game from afar and you think about how they were going to game plan it, I didn't have confidence in Nick Sirianni being as aggressive in the run game as he was. Right. I certainly didn't have any idea or confidence that Jonathan Gannon was going to be aggressive from a defensive standpoint. And they did it to the nth degree, to the tune of 6 sacks in this game. Going into this game, just for perspective, the Detroit Lions had allowed 17 sacks over their first 7 games of the season. Mm-hmm. Compare that to the Raiders. Going into that game with the Eagles and the Raiders, Derek Carr had also been sacked 17 times going into that game. The Eagles weren't able to sniff him in that game. This time around, because you don't have a quarterback as smart, like Derek Carr's a smart quarterback, Jared Goff, not so much. But when you watch this game, the Eagles were able to take advantage of every single opportunity Jared Goff gave them by holding on to the football for that one extra half a second, even for Josh Sweat to get in there, for Fletcher Cox to try to break up the middle of that defensive line, for your blitz to try to get home or at least disrupt the defensive line like Alex Singleton did on the Derek Barnett sack. That I would never have in a million years guessed that Jonathan Gannon was going to be that aggressive with his defense, which is off the charts aggressive compared to what we have seen throughout this season. So to see those two coaches step up with their own game plan and acknowledge what they were playing against and decide to exploit it the way they did in this particular game, I couldn't be happier with. That I couldn't be more pleasantly surprised with. Now learn from it, enjoy it, and as I've been saying throughout the first hour of the show, now apply it to the other games that you have later in the season, because the fan base, believe it or not, every once in a while, they know what they're talking about. As Jason Kelsey said 2 weeks ago, this was an example of them knowing what they're talking about. And it's not just because it's the Lions. These schemes, these concepts can work against better football teams. Why not use it? Why not? Here's what I have a problem with. I talked to Steven Nelson earlier in the week, and he referred to Jonathan Gannon's defensive scheme as genius. It's a genius defensive scheme because they don't want to allow the big play. Okay. But every once in a while, don't you as a defense want to make a big play on your own so that you're keeping the offense guessing? And I think them being able to take Jared Goff off any time, I'm not even talking about a rhythm in terms of completing passes, but just in terms of a 3-step drop, getting comfortable in the pocket, maybe hitting a shot down the field later. They were able to keep him off of any type of rhythm, the entire offense off of any type of rhythm, because for the first time all season, we actually saw them play aggressive football. And that, to me, is something probably more than anything, including Boston Scott, I want to see taken for the rest of the season.
See, what they did in this game is what good teams do to inferior teams. They broke down all of their weaknesses and attacked them on both sides of the football. And they kept attacking, and And that's a lot of time what separates the better teams from the weak teams in terms of how do you strategize and attack, how do you attack your opponent to get the better of them. And now the word has been out for a while. Detroit is just a bad, beat-up football team. And they're probably going to get the first overall pick in the draft next year. They need a quarterback of the future. And, oh, by the way, there really are no standout quarterbacks in this draft coming up next year. So the Eagles basically exposed, and other teams are going to try to do the same thing now and probably will have a good measure of success in terms of you can run on them all day. If you put pressure on Jared Goff, he has nobody to throw to except the tight end and the running back out of the backfield. But you can blanket them and make them so one-dimensional that it makes your day that much easier. What teams were doing to the Eagles, now the Eagles did to somebody else. So, it's a very small fraternity in terms of success and failure. And a lot of times there's a thin line. Now, talent is a big part of it, but a lot of times there's a thin line between success and failure in the National Football League. It's paying attention to the little details and doing it better than your opponent.
I mean, and we talk about, sorry, Mark. No, I was just going to say, we talk about progress and how one of the most frustrating things, especially from Nick Sirianni, if not the entire coaching staff, has been that we just didn't see any progress, any improvements, any adjustments. And I think we saw that today, finally. I think, we talk about being relieved and the emotions we feel. I think happy, at least for me, kind of captures relief and pleasantly surprised and all of those things, but also a little bit, because I think this game was one of those determining games where people said if we had lost this game, someone was going to get fired, whether or benched, whether it was Howie or Nick Sirianni or Jalen Hurts. I saw someone in the comments, Ted just said Jalen wasn't smiling. I'm not going to read too much into someone not smiling. He rarely smiles, but how much of it was because they kind of had a fire lit under their butts and they were like, oh, wow, we really the pressure's on. We got to step it up here or we're done.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to take it all, what do you call it, with a grain of salt. Just because, and some other people are pointing out, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Devin, about just, figures and your number one running back gets hurt, and now it takes you to start running the football.
Yeah.
I think this is going to make us bang our heads against the wall next week. I think next week, just to jump way ahead of ourselves here, to not even enjoy this win for 24 hours, right? I just feel like we have seen the Eagles run the football well, and then they get away from it. And there's no better example of that than last week's game against the Raiders, where you saw them come out running the football. They even set up a nice pass down the field to Dallas Goedert and that whole thing. And then I was fully expecting this week for them to get away from it. Gunnar, and I think you referenced it earlier, they came out running the football, and it was like, okay, they're doing it again. Now are they also going to not run the football later? So it was a matter of when they were going to take away what was working for them for no other reason than, okay, it's time to start throwing the ball again. But I can't remember an Eagles game in the last 30 years where they just ran the football. I mean, you got to go back to Ricky Waters, for instance, when they ran the football this much with their running backs. And that, to me, is a far cry from anything we've seen in the Reed, Kelly, Peterson, and obviously the Sirianni, very young Sirianni era so far. So next week, are we going to be doing the same thing, waiting for them to go away from it? Or now these last two games, they started with it, got away from it. This game, they stuck with it throughout the entire game. Are we now seeing a new version of the Eagles offense going forward where they feel a lot more comfortable running the football? Maybe they've actually finally figured out that with a young, inexperienced offensive line, guys that are just looking to get their reps, maybe it helps them a little bit to run the football as opposed to trying to hold a pass block for 3, 4, 5 seconds. Maybe the thud and done is a better way to get these guys integrated into an offensive game plan in the NFL. Maybe instead of just throwing the ball every single play, maybe this is the best version of this team going forward in terms of, and only in terms of, not the production, but just the scheme. You're not going to get this production against many teams in the NFL. Most of them, not even a shot. But just the scheme of it, just the idea of what they did today, you can apply and have success down the line.
Well, you hope anyway, because they're going to come across an opponent that's going to take away what they want to do, and they also should have the ability to take away some things that opponent wants to do. I don't think they're going to run the ball as effectively against that Chargers defensive front as they ran the football today. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to throw the ball more. Does your personnel match up well in the passing game against the Chargers passing secondary? That's what you got to find out. Is there a weak link in that Chargers pass secondary? Who do you attack to find that weak link? That's what they're going to have to figure out. And who's your primary weapon in the passing game? Is it Dallas Goedert? Is it Devontae? Is it finally Quez Watkins being unleashed? So that's what we're going to have to figure out in a hurry to keep this thing moving, to see if they can get this record back to sea level and beyond at that point.
All right. Well, Devin, I think we're going to see a photo that you referenced earlier when we come back. Plus, I also want to spend a little bit more time on the defensive side of things. There's one player who is silently having himself a great season on the defensive side of the ball. He had another big play today. We'll talk about him in a second. Do want to remind the good people watching here on 6abc.com, as well as the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, that we are presented by Ocean Casino Resort. Go for the live show. Go for the win. John McMullen will be joining us coming up in just a little bit. Talk a little bit more on Eagles live post-game show.